The hall was never quiet before a performance, not in 10 years, not since Saren died. That night, though, the night she arrived, it was. I noticed it before I noticed her. 40 of my council and their mates seated at the long tables, the fire in the central pit at full roar, the smell of pine resin and roasted meat thick enough to touch, and yet the hall had gone still in a way it had not done in years. No shuffled boots. No whispered debates about the spring alliances. Even Lord Kevin, who could make noise simply by breathing, had set down his cup. I looked up from the table's head. She was standing near the far archway, where the steward's passage met the hall. She had not yet walked to the center platform where the hired entertainers were placed. She was simply standing there, her traveling cloak still on her shoulders, looking around the hall with the unhurried attention of someone memorizing it. The stone vaulting, the wolf-carved pillars, the banners. Not nervous, not performing her arrival. She was genuinely, quietly looking, as if the hall were worth knowing before she sang in it. I could not have told you her age then. She was a woman, full-grown and composed. She wore a deep blue dress beneath the cloak, plain, no embroidery, the kind that had been washed so many times the color had gone soft at the hem. Her hair was dark and simply pinned. She carried a small case for her instrument against her side, held as carefully as something she would not let fall. The steward Orlin materialized at my elbow. He had a talent for appearing when I had not sent for him. "The singer from the Valley Settlement," he said, at a volume just above a murmur. "Amira, no pack name. She was recommended by the Tallow Village elder as the finest voice in the lower valley. I have seated her at the far table with the kitchen staff when she is not performing, as befits her station. She will play the midwinter set and be paid and gone before the feast closes." I said nothing. He took my silence as agreement, which I had long since stopped correcting. Orlin's silences and mine meant different things. She had begun walking toward the center platform now. A few of the hall's younger wolves tracked her movement with the instinctive alertness of pack creatures noticing something new. She did not look at any of them. She moved through the noise and the firelight with a particular kind of stillness, not coldness, not detachment, but the stillness of someone who knew what she was here to do and did not need the room's attention to begin. She sat down on the platform's low stool, opened the case, lifted out a small hollow-bodied instrument, curved and wooden, strung with gut, its surface worn to a warm amber at the places her hands had rested on it for years. She laid it across her knee. Then she looked up. Not at me. I was half in shadow at the table's head, and the firelight was not reaching that far. She looked at the hall itself, at the fire and the wolf banners and the waiting faces, and something shifted in her expression that I could only describe as settling. The way a person looks when they have arrived somewhere they were always going to come to, and they know it. She began to play. I had not moved in 10 years. I want you to understand what I mean by that. I had moved across my lands, ridden campaigns in the northern passes, argued with the council, managed the pack, done all the things a king must do. But the deep thing in me, the part that had not stirred since the night Saren's wolf bond went quiet and did not come back, that part had not moved. Not once. My wolf had not stirred. He had not been sleeping. I would have known if he slept. He was simply gone somewhere far inside me, a presence with no reach, no weight, no inclination to feel anything. 10 years. My council had given up mentioning it after the 3rd year. My wolf's silence was as established a fact of Ironville as the northern wind. The first note she played stopped something in my chest. Not my wolf, not yet. It was something anterior to him, something in the wall I had built around where the grief lived. A warmth I had genuinely forgotten the name of. As if someone had touched a stone I had thought cold for so long I no longer checked it, and it was not cold at all. She was playing something slow and arching, not mournful. The midwinter songs of the lower valley settlements ran to something older than sorrow, something that moved under sorrow the way water moved under ice. Her voice came in after the first phrase, and I will not pretend that I was composed when it did. I straightened. I set down the cup I had been holding without tasting for the past hour. I felt the lords and ladies around me quieting by degrees, the way the hall had quieted when she walked in, as if she carried that particular silence with her wherever she went. She was not performing. I had seen performances all my life, the trained court singers who watched the king's face for approval, who shaped their breath and their phrasing to what the room seemed to want. She was doing the opposite. She was singing to something inside the song. Her eyes were half closed and her body swayed very slightly with the instrument, and she was wholly, entirely elsewhere. Not elsewhere in the sense of absent, but elsewhere in the sense of gone deep into the thing she was making, as if the hall and all of us in it had fallen away, and she was alone with the music in the way you are alone with something true. I did not look away. Lord Kevin was the first of the council to notice that I had not looked away. I saw him notice, from the corner of my eye, the slight adjustment of his posture, the fractional turn of his head in my direction, the way he recalibrated his cup against the table to give himself something to look at that was not my face. 10 years of my counsel reading my silences. I knew all their tells. She sang for an hour. The full midwinter set was traditionally 3 pieces: the opening hymn to the moon, the central weaving song, the closing blessing. She gave us 4, because somewhere in the second piece the hall had gone so completely still that to cut the third short would have been a violence, and she seemed to understand that. When she finished, when the last note of the closing blessing had moved out through the stone vaulting and been absorbed, the silence held for a long moment before anyone moved to applaud. I was watching her face when the silence broke. She came back from wherever she had been, gently, the way a sleeper surfaces, opened her eyes fully, looked out at the hall, at the 50 faces looking back at her with expressions I had not seen in that room in some time, and the thing I saw cross her face was not pride. It was gratitude, as if she were thanking the hall for having let her. I stood. The hall rose with me. That is the custom. But I was aware, as I stood, that I was not standing because of custom. I was standing because not to stand would have required a deliberate effort I did not choose to make. She saw me rise, finally. The distance between the head table and the center platform was 60 feet, and the fire was between us, and she looked across it with that same level, unhurried attention she had given the hall when she walked in. She did not blush or bow. She met my eyes for a moment, steady, clear, without calculation, and then she looked back at the room and lowered her head in a general acknowledgement that included all of us equally. The steward Orlin was moving toward her already, his professional courtier's smile in place, to direct her off the platform and back to the far table. I said, "Seat her at the council table." Orlin stopped. "My lord." "The council table," I said. "She has earned it." He recovered quickly. He always did. "Of course, my lord." But I saw the line of his shoulders, the small tension that said he was already composing the amendment he would make to her instructions, the quiet way he would demote it, place her at the council table's far end, by the lesser lords, where no one of standing would speak to her. I said, "Beside me, Orlin." I had not raised my voice. I did not raise my voice, but the hall was quiet enough that every person in it heard. She sat beside me for the rest of the feast. She was not flustered, which surprised me, or perhaps it did not surprise me, given what I had already seen of her. She was quiet for the first quarter of an hour while the feast resumed around her, the way a person is quiet when they are genuinely listening and not merely waiting for their turn. She ate sparingly and without apology. When the council lord to her left spoke to her, Rowan, who had no unkind impulse in him, and leaned over to ask where she had learned the midwinter weaving song, she answered him with a warmth and a directness that made him lean back and look at her properly for the first time. I did not join the conversation. I listened. She had learned the weaving song from her grandmother, she said. Her grandmother had learned it from hers. It was not written anywhere. It lived in the mouths of the valley women who passed it down, and every generation changed it a little, added something, took something away. So what you heard tonight, she said to Rowan, is not what my grandmother sang. It is what she sang with everything I have understood since. Rowan said, is that not a risk? What if the changes make it worse? She considered this as seriously as the question deserved. Then my daughter or her daughter will hear what is wrong in it and correct it. The song is not mine to preserve unchanged. It is mine to carry honestly. I thought about that for a long time. She left at the end of the feast, not before. She thanked me, spoke directly to me, for the first time, standing at the table's head as the hall emptied around us, and said that she was grateful for the courtesy of the better seat. She said it without any performance of gratitude, without any of the deference that people sometimes put between themselves and what they are actually saying. Just the thing itself, clearly. I said, how long are you in Ironville? 3 days, she said. I came with the Valley's trade delegation. I travel with them when they will have me. They let me sing in the villages along the route. And after 3 days, south again, she said, the spring festival at Aldenmere, then home. She said home, the way a person says a word that genuinely means something. Stay, I said. It came out more directly than I had meant it. She heard the directness, I think. Her eyes moved slightly, recalibrating, not alarmed, thoughtful. My lord, she said carefully, why? My pack wolves, I said, have been ill for 3 weeks. A cold lung, not serious, but 6 of the younger ones are confined to the infirmary wing and are restless and poorly sleeping. A healer has been managing their care, but their recovery is slow. I paused. When you sang tonight, they were quiet for the first time in days. The infirmary keeper told me so at the feast start. I had not yet seen the cause. She absorbed this. You want me to sing to your wolves? I want to offer you a reason to stay, I said. Whether you sing to them or not is your choice. You would be a guest of Ironville, not a hired entertainer. Your own room, your own schedule. Sing when you like, to whom you like. She looked at me for a moment. I did not look away, and she did not either. That is a generous offer, she said, for 3 days' uncertain benefit. You underestimate your voice, I said. The ghost of something crossed her face, not amusement exactly, but the first cousin of it. All right, she said. I will stay. The warmth behind my sternum, which I had felt for the first hour and then watched recede as the feast ended, came back when she said that. It came back quietly, without fanfare, like a fire finding its way out of the ash. I did not tell my wolf. He would know when he knew. She was in the infirmary wing by the 2nd morning. I did not go. I made a point of not going, because there is a difference between asking someone to stay and following her like a young wolf who has never learned restraint. I had reports from the infirmary keeper, an efficient woman named Bresson, who had been managing the pack's health for longer than I had been Alpha King. Bresson was not given to enthusiasm. Her daily reports were 1 sentence each. The lung cold was improving. The young wolves were eating. The restless one had finally slept. The 3rd morning, her report was 2 sentences. The young wolves were eating better. The girl had sung them to sleep each night, and it was working. I read that twice. The 4th morning, because she had agreed to stay a week, and then 2 when Bresson asked, and the wolves asked her themselves in the way wolves ask, which is to lie down near you and put their heads on your feet. I walked through the infirmary passage. I did not intend to stop. The passage ran past the infirmary's large low room, where the sick wolves were kennelled in deep straw on cold days, and the door was ajar. I heard her voice before I reached it. She was not singing the midwinter songs. She was singing something else, something I did not know, short and rhythmic, almost like a counting game, the kind of thing a mother might sing to a child. One of the young wolves, the largest, the restless one, a 2-year male named Garrett whom Bresson had twice nearly sedated for pacing, was lying with his head in her lap. She had her hand on his ear. Her other hand was resting on his flank, rising and falling with his breath, and she was watching his chest as she sang, as if the song were timed to him, as if she were following his breathing and making the music fit it rather than asking his breathing to fit the music. I stood in the passage and did not move for a long time. Something in my chest moved. Not the warmth this time, something older, something that had been behind the warmth all along, waiting. I became aware of it the way you become aware of a sound you have been hearing for some time without naming it, the turning of a lock you had thought rusted shut. My wolf, the piece of me that had gone somewhere far away 10 years ago and stopped answering, raised his head. He did not look around. He simply raised his head and was still, the way a creature is still when it has found the thing it stopped moving for. I walked away from the door before she looked up. I was not ready yet for what I might see in her face if she found me there. I was a king who had learned to manage what he was ready for. But I told Bresson that afternoon that if Myra wished to stay another week while the wolves convalesced, Ironville would be grateful. Bresson said the girl seemed happy enough to stay. Happy enough. I thought about that word happy in connection with a person, and it struck me that I could not remember the last time I had used it about myself or about anyone inside these walls. The days settled into a shape I had not anticipated. Myra moved through the hold as if it were a place she already understood, which surprised me. She was not a woman of rank. She had no standing in any pack, no name that opened doors, no family at Ironville to ease her way. And yet she moved through the infirmary and the lesser kitchens and the courtyard where the wolves were walked on clear days with a quietness that was not smallness. She was at ease, not with the ease of someone who has decided to pretend, but with the ease of someone who does not arrange her worth according to other people's hierarchies. She had been 3 years without a fixed home, she told Rowan one evening at the council table's corner. She had stayed long enough at each settlement to learn its songs, and then followed the trade road south in summer and north in winter, carried where the music was. She did not say this with any note of hardship. She said it the way you would describe a life that suited you, one you had arrived at through considered choice, rather than circumstance you were simply enduring. I listened from the table's head and thought about the version of her life in which she had a pack name and a fixed place in a hierarchy, and I thought, with a certainty I did not fully examine, that it would have been the wrong life for her, the wrong container for the thing she was. The steward Orlin was not kind to her. I noted it and said nothing, yet choosing to see how she handled it before I corrected it. He referred to her as the village woman in her presence, directed the hold servants to fulfill her requests last, and contrived small indignities, the late arrival of her meals, the damp wood left for her hearth fire, the undesirable seat at the lesser table on the evenings when the council dined without ceremony. She handled it by not changing. He referred to her as the village woman in her presence. She thanked him for things with such genuine courtesy that it seemed to cause him a kind of confusion, as if he had swung and found no resistance, which is a disorienting thing. On the 5th day, I passed Orlin in the upper passage and stopped walking. "The guest chamber's hearth," I said, "dry wood fully supplied by this evening." He looked at me. He did not ask how I had known. "And Orlin," I said, "her meals arrive with the councils, not after." "Of course, my lord," he said, in the voice of a man deciding rapidly whether to be aggrieved or sensible. He was sensible. In the end, Orlin was always sensible. It was his best quality and the reason I had kept him in the position for 15 years. The council wolves began to greet her in the corridors. Not all of them. Lord Kevin, who had given up refining his politics after his 3rd decade, watched her with the interested neutrality of a man who waits to see which way a thing falls. But Rowan brought her a book of the Valley songs he had found in the library, a hand-copied collection from 3 generations ago, and she sat with it at the great hall's corner table for a whole afternoon, and was so absorbed in it that she did not notice him watching until he cleared his throat to leave, and she startled up and thanked him with such warmth that he walked away visibly unsettled in the pleasant way. I watched all of this from a careful distance, telling myself that this was simply appropriate attention to a guest. My wolf was not fooled. He had been awake since the infirmary doorway. He did not pace or howl. He was too old and too tired for that kind of noise, but he watched in the way that meant that whatever she was, he had already decided. I had not decided. I was not certain I had the right to decide. Saren had been gone 10 years, and the grief of it had settled into something livable. The way an old injury becomes part of the way you stand. You do not cry out with it anymore. It simply shapes how you move. I had told myself the first year that the bond would find me again if it was going to. By the 5th year, I had stopped waiting for it. By the 10th, I had accepted that some wolves mate once and that is all. And then a woman from the valley came to sing at my midwinter feast, and Garrett put his head in her lap. On the 7th evening, she was in the courtyard. I had formed the habit, I will not pretend otherwise, of walking the courtyard's far wall in the late hour before the gates were closed. It was my habit to check the gate sentries. This is what I told myself. The courtyard was also where she went in the evenings, once the infirmary wolves were settled, to sit on the stone bench near the pine tree and play her instrument alone. She looked up when she heard my boots on the stone. "My lord," she said. "You do not have to stop," I said. "I was not going to," she said, which made something in me shift with a warmth that was not comfortable exactly, but real. I sat down at the far end of the bench, far enough that there was no presumption in it, close enough that the cold of the night was shared. She played something she had not played in the hall, something that had no shape I could name, as if it were not a song yet but was becoming one as she played. A thing worked out in real time. "Is that one of the valley songs?" I asked. "No," she said, "it is one I am making. Making it now. I make them the way I make anything," she said, "by sitting with it until I understand what it wants to be." I thought about that. How do you know when it is finished? She considered for a moment. "When it stops surprising me," she said. "When it has told me everything it knows." She paused. "Most songs take years. And if you die before it is finished?" She looked at me then, with an expression I could not immediately decode. Not offense, something more interested than that. "Then someone else will finish it," she said. "That has always been the arrangement." I sat with that in silence. The pine tree moved above us, slightly, in the wind off the northern ridge. The firelight from the hall's high windows made patterns on the courtyard stone. "You are not afraid of things being unfinished," I said. It was not a question. It was an observation I had been arriving at all week. "No," she said. She tilted her head. "Are you?" I had not been asked that by anyone who seemed genuinely interested in the answer for a very long time. "Yes," I said. She nodded, as if this were useful information she intended to keep and not challenge. We sat in the courtyard until the sentries changed. Neither of us remarked on how long that was. I told myself, walking back to my hall, that this was the behavior of a man who had a guest he found interesting. That was all. That was a reasonable thing. The king of Ironville found a traveling singer from the lower valley interesting. This happened sometimes. My wolf lay down in the middle of my chest and rested his great head on his paws and was utterly, immovably settled. On the 8th evening it was colder. The wind had turned and come down from the high ridge with the bite of iron in it, and I almost did not go to the courtyard. I told myself it was too cold. I went anyway, and she was there, her cloak pulled close, still playing slower than usual, the notes spacing out in the cold air as if each one needed more room. "You should be inside," I said. "So should you," she said. She glanced up, "and yet here we are." I sat at my end of the bench. She played for a few minutes without speaking. The fire had gone low in the far brazier, and the courtyard was lit only by the high windows and the cold white light of the sky. She said, without looking up from the strings, "You have been a widower for 10 years." It was not a question. Rowan, I guessed, or one of the kitchen staff. The hold was not large enough to keep that kind of history private. "Yes," I said. "I did not know her," she said, "but the hold remembers her, the way it carries itself, the way the older wolves look when they speak of that time." She paused. "A place holds the shape of a loss." "Yes," I said again. The word was all I had. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers resting still on the strings. "I am not asking you to tell me about her," she said. "I only want you to know that I am not unaware of it. Of what it costs to let something move in you again after a long quiet." I looked at her for a long time. The cold light on her face, the instrument in her hands, the particular quality of her stillness, which was never absence but always the fullness of someone genuinely present in a moment. "It surprised me," I said at last, "that it could. I had stopped expecting it." She nodded slowly. She did not offer me reassurance or sentiment. She simply acknowledged what I had said the way she acknowledged most things, by receiving it honestly, letting it be what it was. "The songs I cannot finish," she said, after a while, returning her fingers to the strings. "The ones that take years. Sometimes I wonder if they are waiting for me to have lived something I have not lived yet. Something I needed to understand before the song could know what it was for." I listened to the note she played, long, searching, finding its shape in the night air. "Perhaps that is what all waiting is," she said. "Not an absence, a readying." I did not answer, but the warmth in my chest, which had been quiet while we talked, moved again, deliberate and warm and sure. I told myself, walking back to my hall, that this was the behavior of a man who had a guest he found interesting. That was all. That was a reasonable thing. I no longer believed it. We walked the courtyard together the 9th evening. She spoke to me about the valley settlements, the spring roads, the way different packs receive traveling singers, with curiosity, with wariness, occasionally with the particular coldness of a place that has decided ahead of time that a woman with no pack name is not worth courtesy. I listened and did not interrupt. She did not say these things to invite my sympathy. She said them because they were true, and she was accustomed to speaking the truth plainly. "You are not bitter about it," I said, on the 9th evening. "No," she said. She thought about it for a moment, the pine needles dark above us in the cold. "Bitterness is what happens when you expect things to be different than they are, and then are surprised when they are not. I have known for a long time how some packs treat a woman with no name." She paused. "It costs me nothing to know it. I simply factor it in and continue." "That is a remarkable way to live," I said. She looked at me with an expression that was not quite amusement and not quite disagreement. "It is the only way I have found," she said. "That does not require me to spend my energy being angry at the weather." I found, walking back to my chambers that night, that I was holding onto that sentence the way you hold onto something you want to look at again in better light. On the 9th day, the delegation from House Verneth arrived. I had known they were coming. They had sent a herald 2 weeks before, requesting a trade audience for the spring alliances. Verneth was a large pack from the eastern settlements, expansionist in the way of families who had been prosperous so long they had forgotten that prosperity required constraints. Their lord was a man named Farrell, my age, louder than his authority warranted. With 2 sons he was already trading like property, and a manner of conducting negotiations that involved making everyone in the room aware that he was larger than them. He arrived with 6 retainers and his eldest son, took the guest hall with the confidence of a man who intends to renegotiate the terms of the hospitality he has been offered, and sent Orland to inform me that he wished to begin the trade talks immediately rather than waiting for the formal morning. I met with him in the lesser chamber. He wanted the Spring Grain Road, a passage through Ironville's eastern ridge for his grain carts, in exchange for a reduction in the tithe toll on Ironville's border markets. The terms he offered were not outrageous on their face, but the framing was. He spoke as if the grain road were already his and we were merely settling the paperwork. I listened and offered him nothing in return except my attention, which was colder than he had perhaps expected. Farrell was not a stupid man. He recognized a closed door when he walked into one. He pivoted, gracefully enough, to other matters: the Northern Pass conditions, the spring grain estimates, the rumors from the Eastern Territories about pack border disputes that he said were of concern to both of us. He was maneuvering, reestablishing ground. I let him. I was listening, and I was measuring, and I was also, despite my best effort, aware that Myra was somewhere in the hold, probably in the infirmary or the courtyard, entirely unaware that a man from the Eastern Packs was sitting across a table from me planning the next day's second request. He made it over supper. "The girl," Farrell said, as if we were finishing a conversation we had been having all along. He reached for his cup. "The Valley Singer. I heard her this morning from the courtyard. Remarkable voice." I said nothing. He took my silence as an invitation, which people tended to do. "She has no pack name," he said, "no standing. Traveling with a trade delegation as an itinerant singer." He shook his head with the practiced concern of a man performing reasonableness. "A waste, frankly. A voice like that should be housed properly under a good roof, in a home where it can be put to use." He glanced at me. "I would take her on as a tithe bond entertainer. 3 years paid, housed in Verneth's guest quarter. She would want for nothing." A tithe bond. The words landed in my chest like a stone into still water, and the ripples moved through me with a clarity I had not felt in 10 years. It was not anger exactly. Anger is hot and urgent. This was colder, the cold of a certainty that has no room for doubt in it. No. Not under any framing, not under any version of polite deflection that preserved his ego and my alliance. No. "She is not available," I said. Farrell paused with his cup halfway to his mouth. The pause was a fraction of a second. He covered it well. "Ah," he said, "Ironville's own tithe, then." "Not Ironville's tithe," I said. "She is a guest of this hold, free to leave when she chooses." "Of course," he said agreeably, too agreeably. "And her choosing, she knows what she is, that she has no alliance protection, no pack name. She travels alone on valley roads with no one to speak for her standing." He meant it as information. He said it in the voice of a man who is informing you of a problem for which he happens to have a solution. The suggestion underneath it was clear. A woman with no name could be spoken for by anyone willing to speak, and that his offer was, in the long run, her best option. I looked at him across the table. "She will not need anyone to speak for her standing," I said, "after tomorrow." He looked at me. Something shifted in his expression, not quite understanding, but the outline of understanding beginning to arrive. I did not explain myself. I rose, indicated that the evening's conversation was concluded, and left him to his retainers and his supper. I walked to the infirmary wing. She was there, as I had known she would be. The sick wolves were all recovering now. Garrett, the big restless one, was well enough to be moved to the outer kennels in 2 days, and she was doing what she had done most evenings, sitting on the low bench inside the infirmary door with her instrument, playing something quietly while the wolves drowsed in the straw. She looked up when I came in, read my face with that same direct, unhurried attention. "Something has happened," she said. "A matter of tomorrow's audience," I said. "I want to tell you before the morning." I sat down on the bench beside her, not the far-end distance of the courtyard. There was only one bench in the infirmary, and I sat in the middle of it, which put us close. "A lord from the Eastern Pack has asked to take you into a tithe bond. 3 years housed at Verneth." She was still. Not the stillness of fear. She processed things I had learned by going very quiet first. A tithe bond, she said. I did not know he had noticed me. He heard you from the courtyard. She nodded slowly. What did you tell him? That you were not available. She looked at me, and after tomorrow. I had spent the walk from the lesser chamber to the infirmary deciding how to do this. There was a formal way, the public naming, the full court assembled, the ceremonial weight of it done correctly and witnessed. There was also a quiet way, a thing said between two people in a wolf infirmary while the sick wolves slept, and the fire in the passage outside threw light through the door crack. I had decided on the formal way, because she deserved it done properly. But I also owed her the truth before the morning, because asking her to stand in front of my court without warning her was not something I was willing to do. In the morning, I said, I intend to name you my fated mate before the full council and Lord Farrell's delegation. The bond has been waking in me since the night you sang. I will not dress it in less certainty than it has. What I will also tell you is that you are not obligated to receive it. You may say no in front of the court without consequence to you, and I will arrange your safe passage south before the sun is down. She was very quiet. I will tell you one more thing, I said. If you say yes, it is not for my sake or for the council's or because you have no other choice. It is because you have considered it and you want to. Those are the only grounds on which I would want it to happen. The fire from the passage moved, and for a moment the light was warmer in the infirmary. The wolves shifted in the straw, Garrett exhaling in his sleep, the sound of the hold settling around us. She said, "Your wolf has been waking." "Yes." "I felt it," she said, "or I did not know what it was, but I felt it. 3 days ago, maybe 4. Something in the air between us that changed." She was quiet for a moment. "My grandmother talked about the bond. She said it was not a feeling you invented and not a feeling you doubted. She said it was simply something that was there, the way your own heartbeat is there. You do not generate it. You only notice it or do not. Your grandmother was wise." "She was," Myra said. She looked down at the instrument in her hands, at the worn places where she had held it for years. "I have not had a pack, you know. No name, no standing, no alliance to trade. I have been fine without them. I am not telling you this as a wound, only as a fact. But I have also wondered sometimes whether the fated bond would know how to find me without those markers, whether it would be able to locate me at all." "It found you," I said. She looked at me then, all the way she had looked at me once across the hall above the fire, steady and clear, and with nothing positioned between us. "It found me," she agreed. "Then in the morning." "In the morning," she said, "I will stand with you." My wolf made no sound. He simply laid his great head back down, this time across my heart, and breathed. The morning came cold and bright, the kind of northern winter morning that makes the stone walls ring. I had the council assembled in the great hall by the second bell, all of them, including Kevin, who had the self-preservation instinct to be prompt when he could tell something of consequence was about to happen. Farrell and his delegation were there as well, by my direct request, delivered through Orlin with a warmth that was, I felt, appropriate given the circumstances. Myra arrived when the bell rang, not before it. She came from the guest's passage, dressed in the blue dress I had seen her in on the first night. It was the good one, I understood now. She had not had occasion to wear it since. She had her hair pinned up simply, and she wore no jewelry and needed none. She walked to the center of the hall with the unhurried calm of a woman who has decided something and is at peace with it. Orlin was standing to my left. I felt him understand, I think before I said anything, what was about to happen. The quality of his stillness was the quality of a man recalibrating very rapidly. "Lords of the council," I said, "Lord Farrell and guests of Verneth." My voice carried easily in the stone hall as it always did. "I have an announcement that pertains to the matter Lord Farrell raised at last evening's supper, and to a matter of longer standing in Ironville." I looked at Myra, she looked back at me. No signal passed between us. We did not need a signal. I stepped down from the dais. There is a particular silence that a great hall full of wolves produces when something unexpected is happening. Not the held breath of dread, the held breath of recognition. When 50 creatures who understand the fated bond at the level of blood and breath feel it in the air before they have been told. It descended over the hall as I walked down the dais steps. I felt it the way you feel a pressure change before a storm. Every wolf in that room was very still. I crossed the hall. Not quickly, not urgency, but certainty, which are different things in the way you move. I came to where she was standing, stopped in front of her, and offered her my left hand with my palm up. She placed her hand in mine. The bond woke. It woke the way something wakes when it has been waiting a long time and has learned patience, not with a crash, not with the thunderclap drama of the young. It came up through the mark on my left wrist, steady and warm and entirely itself, a light that moved through my blood and settled in my chest beside the warmth that had been there since the night she sang. She inhaled sharply. I felt her hand tighten in mine for just a moment, not with pain but with the surprise of it, and then she breathed out, and her hand steadied. I looked at our wrists. The mark was plain on both of them, old wolf scripture. The mate bond in the language that preceded language, burning gold at the edge and then settling into something quieter, something permanent. I heard Kevin, somewhere behind me, exhale slowly through his nose. I kept my eyes on her face. She was looking at the mark with an expression I recognized because I felt it in my own chest, the expression of a truth that does not surprise you but that still moves you, because being right about something real is a moving thing. "Myra," I said quietly, not for the hall, for her, "will you be my fated mate and my Luna, freely and in your own choosing?" She looked up from our wrists and looked at me. "Yes," she said simply. The way she said most things, without adornment, without performance, the thing itself. I folded her hand inside both of mine and turned to face the hall. Farrell had gone very quiet. He was standing at the guest's table with an expression that had the texture of a man reviewing a conversation he had held the previous evening and finding it, in retrospect, poorly constructed. His eldest son, to his credit, simply looked at the bond marks and blinked. The council was still, not with the stillness of opposition, with the stillness of 50 wolves who felt the bond's truth in the air and knew, as wolves know, that it was not a political arrangement or a strategic choice. It was the oldest thing they knew. Rowan, who had brought her the book of Valley Songs, lowered his head first. Not a performer's bow, the real thing, the pack acknowledgement. 2 of the younger council wolves followed. Orland, to his credit, followed shortly after. I could see the precise moment he decided that the version of events in which this had always been his intention was available to him, and he took it. Kevin was last. He looked at me for a long moment, the look of a man who had watched me for a decade and had arrived, apparently, at a conclusion he had not expected. Then he lowered his head slowly, with the weight of something he meant. I felt her hand in mine, steady and warm. I felt my wolf, fully awake for the first time in 10 years, standing in my chest with the settled presence of a creature that has come home. Not triumphant. He was not the kind for triumph, not anymore. Simply present, simply here. And the warmth behind my sternum, the warmth I had forgotten the name of on the night she first sang, I understood now what it was. I had a name for it. I had always had the name. I had only stopped using it. It was the same warmth Saren's loss had taken with it. It was not replaced. Grief is not replaced. You do not swap one love's warmth for another. But it was returned to me differently. In its own shape, carrying its own name. In the warmth of a woman who made music the way she did everything else, honestly, from the deepest part of herself, without asking the room's permission. Farrell cleared his throat before he left. He wished me well, formally, in the voice of a man who is managing his face carefully. I thanked him for the long journey and the audience, and I told him that the spring grain road would be discussed at the equinox talks along with the rest of the border arrangements, on terms to be drawn fairly for both packs. He received this without argument. He was a man who understood, when a room had fully changed its configuration, that standing in the old one was a waste of his time. He and his delegation were gone by midday. Kevin found me briefly in the passage before the noon meal. He was not a man who spoke much when silence would serve, and what he said was brief. 10 years, he said. He looked at me. It is good. That was all. He walked away, and I stood in the passage for a moment holding those 3 words, which were, from Kevin, a great deal. Rowan was more expressive. He came to the afternoon's business with the careful brightness of a man who has been right about something, and is trying not to demonstrate it too visibly. He had brought the Valley Songs book with him, set it quietly at the edge of the table before the council sat. For the record, he said, to no one in particular, I spoke with her first. I told him the record would note it. Orland did not speak to me directly about the morning's events. He did not need to. I watched him, through the afternoon, making the small adjustments of a man revising his understanding of the landscape. The slightly warmer word when he directed a servant to prepare the better guest chamber as a permanent appointment. The careful absence of the village woman from his speech. He would come around entirely, in time. He always did. That was his particular competence. He could recalibrate without requiring anyone to witness the moment he did. Myra stood beside me through the rest of the morning's business. Not because I had asked her to, she had a choice, in all things. But she had seemed to feel that standing beside me was where she was, and so that was where she stood. She was quiet through the business of councils and alliances, listening, I thought, with the same quality of attention she brought to everything, the attention of someone who is genuinely learning a place rather than merely occupying it. In the afternoon, she went back to the infirmary. Garrett had been cleared to move to the outer kennels, and she had promised to accompany him and help him settle in the new space, because he was still nervous in unfamiliar places, and she had learned that he did better with her voice in the room. I went with her. I stood in the doorway of the outer kennel and watched her walk Garrett through the new space, speaking to him in the easy way she spoke to the wolves, not commanding, not coaxing, simply talking, as if the conversation were mutual. He walked the perimeter of the kennel slowly, sniffing at the straw in the corners, and then he lay down in the center of the floor and looked at her, and she sat down beside him in the straw in her good blue dress without any hesitation at all, and put her hand on his ear. You will have to have other dresses made, I said from the doorway. She looked up, the ghost of that expression again, the almost amusement. I will need them at my own measurements, she said. The valley and this kingdom have different ideas about what a dress should be. Tell Orland, I said, tell him exactly what you want. She considered this. He will not like that. He will do it, I said, and he will be better for it. She smiled then, not the composed, patient half-smile I had seen across the hall in the courtyard. A real one, warm and unhurried, the way her music was unhurried, the kind of smile that had not had to practice being small. I stood in the doorway of the outer kennel, and felt the old warmth settle in my chest the way warmth settles when it knows it is home. That afternoon, the bond mark had settled from gold to the quieter color it would keep, a deep copper rose, visible at the wrist, unmistakable to any wolf who looked. 2 of the younger kitchen staff had seen it when she came through the corridor for the evening meal, and had stopped in place, eyes moving from her wrist to mine, and then had lowered their heads with the wordless instinct of pack creatures who recognize the mate bond before the mind has caught up. She had thanked them as she thanked everyone, directly, warmly, without making anything larger than it was. They had watched her walk on and then looked at each other, and then at me with expressions I could not quite read, but that seemed to contain a good deal. I had the hall set for the evening in the warmer configuration, the long tables brought together, the fire built high, the pack eating together rather than in the staggered hierarchy of formal dinners. It was something I had done rarely in 10 years. The closer tables reminded me of the years when Saren had insisted on them, had said that a pack that ate at a distance from one another drifted at the edges in all the ways that mattered. I had let it go after. But I found I wanted it again that evening. Myra noticed. She said nothing about it directly. That was her way. But I saw her take in the room as she came in, the fire and the drawn-together tables and the hold gathered around them, and something in her face softened in the way it softened when she found something worth noting. I held the chair beside me and she sat down, and the hall found its warmth. That is what I want you to understand when I tell this. Not the ceremony, not the bond mark, not the hall falling silent. Though all of those were true and all of them mattered. What I want you to understand is the afternoon light in the outer kennel, and a woman sitting in the straw in her good blue dress, and a wolf's head heavy in her lap, and the kind of quiet that is not emptiness but fullness. I had been a man with a kingdom and a grief and a wolf, who had not spoken to me in 10 long years. She came from the valley to sing at my midwinter feast, and she sat in my courtyard and made music by following what it wanted to be, and she spoke to a restless wolf in a language that needed no translation, and she stood in front of my council and said yes to something she had every right to say no to, and she said it simply, as she did everything, and the hall went quiet with the truth of it. I learned that year the difference between a life that is managed and a life that is lived. The difference is small from the outside. The rooms are the same. The kingdom is the same. The duties are the same. The council still argues and the northern passes are still cold and Orlin is still Orlin, though he has become, I will say, rather more courteous with the household staff than he was before, as if a lesson took, quietly, when he wasn't watching for it. But when she sang in the evenings in the great hall, or the courtyard, or the infirmary wing, or later, on the long summer nights when the northern sky stayed light until the second watch and we sat on the outer wall where you could see the valley's dark line against the stars. When she sang, she was not performing for me. She was singing because the song was in her and the song was true, and I was there to hear it, and that was enough. She told me once about the weaving song. The midwinter one, the one that had stopped the hall on the first night. She told me that the word her grandmother had used for it, the valley tongue word, the one that did not translate exactly, meant something between the thing that connects and the thing that was always already there. A word for the thread that runs underneath everything, that you do not make and do not own, that you only, if you are lucky, learn to follow. I thought about it for a long time. And when I thought about the night she walked in from the steward's passage with her traveling cloak still on, and looked at the hall as if it were worth knowing, when I thought about that warmth behind my sternum that I had forgotten the name of, I understood that I had not fallen into something unexpected. I had walked back into something I had thought lost. She carried it all those years. She had been carrying it the whole time, all those valley miles, in the instrument worn amber at the places her hands had rested for years. All it took was a hall quiet enough to hear it. All it took, I understood now, was a king willing to sit still long enough to stop managing his own silence and let the music arrive. Garrett kept coming to find her, long after his lungs were well. He would appear at whatever door she was nearest to and sit and wait, and if she had time she would sit with him, and if she did not have time she would say so, and he would wait a little longer anyway. By spring he had taken to sleeping at the foot of the door to our chambers, his great side rising and falling in the dark, and when I asked her once if she minded the weight of him, the inconvenient size, the way he tracked mud through the passage, she said that she did not mind things that were loyal and entirely clear in their intention, and I did not ask again. My wolf, for his part, had nothing left to say. He had been saying it, I came to understand since the first night, in the warmth behind my sternum, in the turning of the lock, in the raising of his great head in the infirmary passage. He had not needed words for it. He had simply recognized what I was slower to arrive at, and he had waited for me with the patience of a creature that had waited a very long time and knew, with complete certainty, that the thing worth waiting for was worth waiting for. I asked her, much later, if she had been afraid that morning in the hall. She thought about it for a moment, the way she thought about things that deserved a real answer. No, she said, I was not afraid. She paused. I was moved. I asked her what the difference was. Fear, she said, is when you do not know what you are walking toward. Moving is what happens when you do. I put her hand inside both of mine, the way I had done in the hall that morning, and the bond mark on my wrist was warm against her pulse. There is a song in the valley settlements now. Rowan told me about it on his last visit south, with the pleased expression of a man who considers himself partly responsible for things he merely witnessed. A new one, they say, passed down already to 2 generations of singers, about a woman with no name who sang at a midwinter feast and was heard by a king who had forgotten how to listen. They do not use her name in it. They call her only the one who carried the song home. I told her this one evening, sitting on the outer wall in the late light. She was quiet for a while. The valley's dark line was just visible on the horizon, a blue shadow between the snow and the sky. Do you like that? I asked. That they have made a song of it. I think, she said slowly, that it is exactly as it should be. The song does not belong to me any more than the weaving song did to my grandmother. She tilted her head toward me. But I am glad they got the essential part right. What is the essential part? She looked at me. That someone listened, she said. The valley is a long way south, and the midwinter road is hard in a cold year. She did not go back to it. She did not need to. She brought the songs with her.